it is more important than ever to get your AEs and SDRs involved in your educational event, in your thought leadership strategy. And in order to do that, the alignment needs to be really, really awesome. And this needs to be a company-wide priority starting from the top. If your company is small to mid-size, like up to a few hundred employees, it literally needs to start all the way at the CEO level. If it's significantly larger than that, it's a CRO or chief commercial officer kind of initiative where basically like coming down from the C-level, coming down from the board, your company has decided that it is incredibly important for your team, especially your client-facing employees, to be seen as the definitive go-to experts on your space when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data centers, colocation, and interconnection. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and I am thrilled to welcome you to this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live stream, where each week I tackle a handful of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about throughout the full data center ecosystem, regardless of whether you're part of a data center operator, technology, facilities company, construction or real estate company, or even outsourced sales and marketing company in and around data centers, critical facilities, and digital infrastructure. And regardless of what your role is on the go-to-market, on the GTM team, perhaps you're in sales, such as an account executive or sales development rep. Maybe you work in marketing. Perhaps you work as a customer success manager or account manager. Maybe you're in product or channel partnerships, or perhaps you are the orchestra conductor, the executive sponsor that brings everyone in a unified manner together to focus on elevating the role of your individuals, your team, and your company in the growth of the amazing data center industry that we are in right now. So what is on the agenda for today? First up, we're going to talk about how a data center infrastructure company can improve its end user communications. After that, we'll turn our attention to how a data center colocation and interconnection company can increase lead generation. Then we'll look at how a data center infrastructure management, DCIM software company, can grow revenue. After that, we'll take a real quick break from our sponsor. Then when we come back, we'll look at how to implement data center segmentation for sales and marketing growth. We'll also be talking about how a data center infrastructure service provider can increase sales. And then as we head down the home stretch on this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show live stream, we'll look at how a data center relocation company can close more deals. Now, to make sure that you stay in the loop about upcoming events like this and resources like this, make sure that you subscribe to our Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter, which comes out each Sunday, delivered directly to your email inbox. You can sign up for free directly on our website at www.dcsmi.com, and you will see a button to subscribe right at the top of the homepage. So without any further ado, let's jump right into this week's first question, which is, how can a data center infrastructure business improve its end user communications? So the most important strategy, the most important foundation to think about when it comes to improving how you communicate with end users is to really truly understand, first and foremost, what business your company is in. You'd say, well, that's easy. We're in the data center infrastructure business. Okay, but what can we do to dial that in just a little bit more? For example, when we look at the case studies section on your website, what do those companies and those individuals have in common? From what those companies have in common, we will likely see some common threads across where they're located. Maybe there's certain regions or certain countries or certain continents, or perhaps you're able to sell infrastructure globally. So that's the first important consideration when we're thinking about your ideal client profile and improving end user communication. Next, what company size do your best clients have in common? Do you tend to do really well with enterprise clients? Do you concentrate most of your growth? Do you do best with mid-market clients? Or are you hitting it out of the park? Are you not winning the gold medal of SMB, of small and medium sized business, or sometimes known as small and medium sized enterprises, SMBs or SMEs, not to be confused with the other acronym SME of subject matter expert. But so there's a geographic part of all of this. There's a company size part of all of this to dial in who you provide infrastructure for. And then many times there's also a business model or a vertical industry kind of concentration part of this as well. Because when it comes to digital infrastructure, depending on where you're located at the intersection of location and industry, sometimes some regulatory considerations pop up. Depending on where you're located, sometimes regulatory considerations pop up regardless of the industry. So it's really important to know these 3 or 4 different characteristics, parameters that define where your company sells and services, where you do best with your infrastructure business. Then within these kinds of companies, who are the main stakeholders that you want to communicate with? Who are these end users? This is often called going from the ideal client profile to segmenting by buyer persona. A buyer persona is a semi-fictional representation of an ideal client that you want to build a relationship with and educate and build trust with over time. And buyer personas are put together by actual research and some select educated speculation. The actual research is actually really, really important. A lot of people skip over that step. They maybe just pull them out of thin air and they talk to a couple people internally, like Bob and Sally, who've been in the industry forever, for decades. The problem is if all of your research is limited to internal stakeholders, oftentimes you get this information, this research coming through a filter that may not give you the whole picture of your buyer persona's goals and challenges and thoughts and priorities in their own words. So I would caution you when you're building out your segmentation strategy, when you're doing your buyer persona, when you're doing your customer insight research, which is a really, really important prerequisite to getting on your end user communications right. When you're doing all of this, do your internal interviews, but limit that to about a quarter, 20-25% of the input into your buyer personas. Most of the input for your buyer personas, for getting your communications and getting your messaging right, needs to come from interviews with actual prospects, actual clients who line up with that particular proposed segment, proposed buyer persona that you're going after. In a perfect world, these interviews are conducted face-to-face in their own office, in their own environment, in their own data center, wherever they work. Second best, like this, video interviews. Third best, I guess a distant third best would probably be phone interviews if they want to do it a little old school. Surveys can sometimes help. If you don't have access to any of that, at the absolute minimum, find 10 or a dozen or so representative prospects and clients and go search up their profiles on LinkedIn and search up and see what shows up as well with that person's name and company name when you do a search, when you see a search engine results page on something like Google. And from that, you should be able to find a consensus based on how they describe themselves, how they describe their companies, how they describe what they work on at their companies and their biggest goals, their biggest challenges, the conferences they go to, the publications they read, the skills that they're endorsed for, the kind of content that they share and comment on and reshare. And then again, take that same person and go look and see what shows up on a search engine results page. Can you see any trade journals that they were interviewed in? Can you see any conferences that they've spoken at? Can you see any podcasts, getting a little meta here, or webinars that they've spoken at where you can watch a few minutes or more of them in action, so you not only get their words, but you get their body language and intonation and the full picture, the next best thing to interviewing that person live. So when you get that together, you're, again, looking for the most commonly heard goals, the most commonly heard challenges across this proposed segment, this proposed buyer persona. And for a digital infrastructure business or any kind of business in and around the data center marketplace, you will likely want to prioritize. So you have a primary buyer persona, your most important economic stakeholder, a secondary buyer persona, your second most important kind of economic stakeholder. Sometimes there's a tertiary, a third most important. For some of you, you may get to the point where you have a negative buyer persona, where you've come to the conclusion that when this kind of stakeholder shows up around the table, It's the kiss of death. We don't want them involved. They're like, they'll destroy the momentum. So if that's the case, we also need to know about that person, because you may want to have a drop down list on your lead gen form so you know if it's that person. You certainly want to train your marketing and salespeople to avoid spending a lot of time and resources going after that person. If you're doing any kind of targeting using like LinkedIn Sales Navigator or LinkedIn Campaign Manager, you will for sure want to know about this category of negative buyer personas. So again, you don't waste time and resources bringing them into the deals board, bringing them into your sales pipeline. So the key to really improving end user communication is understanding your most important buyer personas, biggest goals and challenges in their own words. Not what you think those words are, but what those words actually are. And when we get this right, our end user communications will resonate. But what's also really, really important with all of this is to remember that the buyer's journey, the way that people buy digital infrastructure, data center infrastructure, has changed dramatically over the past 10 years. It used to be that your prospects and clients spent time with your sales team for about half of the sales cycle, for about half of their research and decision making process. Those back then, the predominant number was 56%. In other words, a typical buyer's journey was about 56% of the way over before vendor contact, before sales contact. And that research was originally done by CEB, the Corporate Executive Board, working with Sirius Decisions and Salesforce. Fast forward a decade or so later, CEB is now owned by Gartner. Gartner found 83% of a typical journey is now over before sales contact or vendor contact. In other words, all of the researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing now happens without you being in the room, without your sales team being in the room. This is an enormous problem for companies that are using an old school playbook, but it is an enormous opportunity for those that are able to take their client-facing team, especially their AEs, their account executives, and their sales development reps, and their account managers, and their marketers, and get that team to show up as teachers, as trusted advisors, as consultants, as subject matter experts, and perhaps the more senior members on that team as thought leaders. Because in a world where all of this self-propelled buyer's journey is happening, your prospects and clients are still incredibly hungry for information, but they don't need anyone to read your homepage to them anymore. They don't need anyone to tell them the information that they can already get out there online by looking at websites, asking questions of their peers on social media, attending webinars, listening to podcasts, going to review websites, asking questions all day long through their personal assistants like Gemini and ChatGPT and Copilot and Claude and Perplexity. All of this has made it so old school salespeople are kind of persona non grata. Your prospects, especially really technical IT professionals, are more allergic than ever when it comes to spending time with members of your sales team. So sure, go back and find some better synonym for the email signature job title. Go back and find a better synonym for the headline and the job title on the LinkedIn profile. If you're doing a lot of events, for the business card. But at the end of the day, this is a mindset change for so many companies. And if you are a smaller mid-sized company yourself, meaning that your company has a couple handfuls or less, or a few dozen, or even a few hundred employees, this kind of initiative needs to start from the top. In other words, if your company has in that band of employees on LinkedIn, like 50 to 200 employees, or even 200 to 500 employees, and certainly less than 50 employees, if your CEO isn't willing to show up for a kickoff meeting and a progress meeting every once in a while to talk about why it's so vital for your company and its team members to be seen as the go-to experts in your space, this will not happen. For those of you that are fans of professional sports, especially fans of baseball, you may recall there was a really popular movie based on a book about 20 years ago called Moneyball. And it talked about how baseball, and eventually this happened throughout all professional sports, were becoming more driven by analytics, by data, by numbers, as opposed to just hunches and gut feels. And people didn't like that early on. So, we're going through a lot of that in the same way, shape, or form when it comes to how digital infrastructure is researched, compared, and ultimately purchased. There's some great companies that are working on heavily feeding into this disruption and helping to provide a much better customer and prospect experience. But I would encourage you to make sure that if you're still using the same old playbook that you've used for the past 5 or 10 years, and your team really feels like they're banging their head against the wall, there is a reason. Buyer preferences have changed. So unless you're selling to extreme outliers, where you tell me that your average client is over 75 years old and is extraordinarily digitally resistant and refuses to get a smartphone and still has a secretary print out and read their email to them, and they're the last people on the planet still using a fax machine and a BlackBerry. Like, if you tell me these things, okay, maybe, but like McKinsey validated that 70 to 80% of B2B decision makers now prefer to make their decisions digitally. And we're selling digital infrastructure. So it is insane to think that your internal champions are digitally resistant. It is equally insane to think that a digitally resistant CEO gets replaced with another digitally resistant CEO. This is where Gen X and Millennial and Gen Z, it's only going to accelerate even further. So if you want to be able to improve your end user communications, at the end of the day, get really specific about your understanding of what your company does, who you do this for in terms of the companies and the buyer personas, and make it an enormous priority to reposition everyone on your client-facing team to be part of this major company redefining initiative, to be seen as the go-to experts in your space on anything and everything having to do with the data center infrastructure business. How does a data center colocation and interconnection company increase lead generation? So your company provides data center and colocation and interconnection to your clients, and you want to increase lead generation. That's terrific. There's a couple of caveats, though. First, as you ask this, and by describing your company as being potentially in 3 different businesses: data center, colocation, and interconnection. So, my first question for you is your company at the stage? In other words, are you way past product market fit? Are you way past go to market fit? Is your company at the maturity stage where you understand whether or not you need 3 different playbooks for these 3 lines of business? Or do the same clients buy most or all 3 of those services? To keep things really simple here, we're going to go with the idea that most of your ideal clients buy data center related services, colocation, and interconnection from your company. So, with that in mind, the next step is, for lead generation, we need to understand 2 basic ideas. One is, a lot of people in and around the data center, digital infrastructure, critical facilities industry use the terms lead and opportunity interchangeably. And when you talk to, and this is a huge problem, because in order for your company, for your client facing team to be successful in the marketplace, alignment across your team members, collaboration, is more important than it has ever been in the history of B2B and enterprise and mid-market technology and infrastructure, digital infrastructure, more important than ever. Why? Because in a self-propelled buyer's journey, your best prospects and clients really don't want to spend much time with your team anymore until they're almost ready to buy. The way we're able to get around that and maintain our relevance is to stop showing up as a vendor and instead show up as teachers, consultants, trusted advisors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders. And in order to do that, we need to do an incredible job of educating and building trust with our most important kinds of companies that are on our target account list, and the most important kinds of buyer personas that work for those companies. And in order to do that, we have to be very bought in. We have to be very aware that the buyer's journey today is so different than it was 10 years ago. people are more sales allergic than ever. We need to focus on providing way, way more value than we ever have in the past during the pre-sales process. Your sales team, specifically your SDRs, your sales development reps, or BDRs, business development reps, or and account executives, AEs, need to be prepared to come in and participate much earlier on in the buyer's journey than they ever have before. On the flip side, your marketers need to be prepared to go much deeper into the buyer's journey than they ever have before. And the cooperation, the collaboration, the working together is more incredibly important than ever. A lot of old school sales professionals in and around data center colocation and interconnection often feel that content and events are largely the domain of the marketing department, especially content. Events like, okay, yeah, tell me which booth to show up and hang out at, which golf tournament to show up at. But for the most part, when it comes historically to strategy around content, even sales content, even sales enablement, this was largely something that was punted over the fence back to marketing. And in the world that we live in now, the hyper competitive world that we live in now, where so many of your prospects don't want to spend time with traditional salespeople and only want to spend time with true industry experts, it is more important than ever to get your AEs and SDRs involved in your educational event, in your thought leadership strategy. And in order to do that, the alignment needs to be really, really awesome. And this needs to be a company-wide priority starting from the top. If your company is small to mid-size, like up to a few hundred employees, it literally needs to start all the way at the CEO level. If it's significantly larger than that, it's a CRO or chief commercial officer kind of initiative where basically, like, coming down from the C-level, coming down from the board, your company has decided that it is incredibly important for your team, especially your client-facing employees, to be seen as the definitive go-to experts on your space when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data centers, co-location, and interconnection. And you'll dial that in further by doing really great customer insight research, by having a really tightly defined ideal client profile, and doing great buyer persona research. You know exactly the goals and the challenges of your most important kind of buyer personas. And you'll put out this world-class educational content, these world-class educational events that allow you to spend a ton of time with prospects and clients throughout their full buyer's journey. Most of the industry researchers now point to about 28 distinct touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision. 28. So what that means is if you're investing aggressively in field marketing, you're probably showing up for one or two epic touch points. The problem is it doesn't matter how epic the golf tournament was. It doesn't matter how amazing the cabana party was poolside in Vegas. Each of those only counts as one touch point. So if you're waiting 364 days for that event to recur, you're going to be sadly mistaken when you discover that your best prospects and clients are not waiting, because when it's time for them to be in market, in that 5%, 10% of the journey that your segment, your addressable market is in at any given time, they're going to search, they're going to social, they're going to review websites, they're going to YouTube, they're going to podcasts, they're going to webinars to get, and most of all, they're going to their peers to get the answers. They're not waiting around for you to show up again till you have this annual thing. So it is so incredibly important for you to have a concerted strategy to show up in way more of those 28 touch points than you're currently showing up today. Because unless you tell me that you're currently like nailing it with 2/3 or 3/4 of those touch points, in other words, you're confident that everyone on your target account list that's a prioritized buyer persona with a deal is getting touched 22, 24, 26 times, something like that, and they're actually getting an educational touch point as opposed to a nag, there's more to do. Because in order for you to recognize the competitive landscape that you're actually in, where you may think you're differentiated and competitively positioned by strictly looking at companies that do what you do with a presence in your market who are roughly the same size. But I can tell you without a doubt that you do not need to have the resources of an NTT or an Equinix or Digital Realty or QTS or Flexential or something like that to knock it out of the park with that. The reality is companies with as few as a couple handfuls of employees can be doing an amazing job with this. but it needs to start from the top down. This needs to be a C-level imperative where you decide that your client-facing team must be seen as the definitive go-to experts in your segment, in your niche within the marketplace to avoid commoditization. So the lead generation approach becomes a lot more straightforward when you look at it that way. In order to have presence throughout those full 26, 28 touch points, you need presence in the awareness stage of the buyer's journey and the consideration stage of the buyer's journey, and not just the decision stage. Most companies that are kind of sort of doing this, dipping their pinky toe in the pool, are showing up with a plan for lead generation in the decision stage. In colocation, this is request a quote or schedule a tour. The problem is that is ignoring 80, 90% of the market who could be a fantastic lead, who could be a fantastic sales opportunity for your company, but they're not ready to talk to sales right now. It may be a couple days away. It's more likely a few weeks away. In some cases, it may be a few months away. But it is incredibly important for your company to build that trusted relationship with those prospects and clients. So when they are actually in the 5% who is in market, that your company is guaranteed to be on the short list. And if you do this incredibly well, in some situations, your educational resources, your events, your strategy for educating and building trust among the most important buyer personas not only guarantees that you're on the short list, but will continue to knock competitors off of their short list. And in some cases, your content can be so insightful that they're spending so much time with your team members that there's no oxygen left for the other competitors. And you know what happens when they get to the decision stage? Your thought leadership, your consultative approach, your educational resources have basically knocked out all of the competitive alternatives, and the short list collapses down to just your company. So when we think about lead generation for this kind of company, we need to be incredibly aware that we need lead generation content for each of our most important buyer personas, personalized to what's most important to them, their biggest goals and challenges. And we need lead generation offers, lead generation content throughout their full buyer's journey. Do we need 28 lead generation touch points? Probably not, but we at the minimum need to cover awareness and consideration and decision, not just decision. Because again, most companies by default, if they're doing this at all, are probably doing a passable job on decision, and they're completely asleep at the wheel on awareness and consideration. So when it comes to a company that does data center, colocation, and interconnection company that wants to increase its lead generation, think about how your prospects and clients now want to research and make their purchase decisions, and show up in the way that they actually want you to. Not with your selfish approach of what you want them to actually be doing, but show up where they actually are. Be helpful, more helpful than you've ever been in the past, with not only answering their questions proactively, but guiding them down the path of how other stakeholders and other similar kinds of companies have gone through this journey from point A to point B throughout the full 28 touch points. And again, this comes from understanding the pattern recognition. It comes from playing the long game. It comes to building a brand in the way that you need to build a brand in this era and beyond, because your brand is no longer just about your color charts, your hexadecimal codes, your fonts, your brand guide, your logo. It is, and not just about creative director aesthetic stuff. Your brand is now everything that people say about your company when you're not in the room. And given that by default, you are no longer in the room for most of the buyer's journey, it is a make or break imperative for you to figure out a way to get back into the room. And it's not going to come from nagging, interrupting, pestering them, and bribing them. It's going to come from adding value to helping them solve their biggest business challenges, their stressors, the things that are causing them to potentially miss their quarter, embarrassment in front of their board, screwing up their vacations, taking away from time with their friends, family, and loved ones, forcing them to do all these crazy things that they never really envisioned having to do. The better job you can do with having empathy and being an educational resource for that, the easier it is to have a lead generation plan that gives them a reason to want to spend time with your team throughout the full buyer's journey. So they are showing up to spend time with you as opposed to you having to chase them all the time. That is the key to a data center colocation and interconnection company increasing its lead generation in today's highly competitive digital infrastructure marketplace. How can a data center infrastructure management DCIM software company grow revenue? So you're in the infrastructure management software business for data centers, a category that's been around for well over a decade at this point, and you're looking to grow revenue. So the first place to start is to figure out where you've been most successful in the past. When we look at your reviews, when we look at your testimonials, when we look at your case studies, what kind of clients onboard the smoothest? What have the best path from initial value to intended value to extended value? What kind of clients love spending time with your account managers, with your customer success managers? Which are most profitable, which are most strategically aligned with what your company does today, and what's on the near future roadmap, 6, 12, 18 months down the road. So this is a combination that almost certainly is going to require input from across your full go-to-market team. It may start with a conversation between your account managers and your product managers, but almost certainly you'll also need to get input from your sales team. If you have channel partners, for sure you'll need input from your CAMs and your CACs, your channel account managers and channel account consultants, or whatever you call these roles within your company. For sure, you're going to need input from and work together with marketing on messaging, product marketing, everything that's being done with lead generation and sales cycle acceleration. And for sure, you will also need executive sponsors involved. At the minimum, depending on your company size, this would be like a chief commercial or chief revenue officer. Could be, depending on your company size, your CEO and CFO may be involved as well. So when it comes to growing revenue, so we know where you've been most successful. That influences how you define your ideal client profile, who's on your target account list, how you segment up these target accounts in terms of buyer personas and prioritizing those buyer personas, all the basic go-to-market playbook kind of stuff that everyone in this space is likely doing. And if you think it's novel, probably look around, because in many cases, you're probably, if you're just getting started with this, maybe catching up to competitors in this space that have been doing well with this for the better part of a decade or so. With that in mind, to grow revenue, there's a couple of different ways that you can grow revenue. And a lot of lessons can be learned from looking at a combination of the digital infrastructure, the data center ecosystem, but also looking at SaaS companies. Because a lot of your business model is probably closer to that of a SaaS company than a colocation or hyperscale data center operator, even though the colocation and hyperscale operators are probably your best kinds of clients. Maybe edge data centers, perhaps it's modular data centers or enterprise end user kind of data centers. But either way, we need to understand exactly what is the job that you're doing for those kinds of clients and how that should factor into your overall playbook. And then we need to understand, what path are you taking for revenue growth? Are you looking to expand existing accounts, or are you looking to generate new accounts? And this is where a chief revenue officer sits down and has discussions and objectives and key results and KPIs, key performance indicators, and SMART goals that will be specific to the account managers, and goals and OKRs and KPIs that are specific to the account executives. And depending on how you've structured your sales team, perhaps the SDRs and the BDRs, the sales development reps or business development reps, depending on how you've structured this within your company. And again, if there's channel partnerships, they'll be a factor as well in some of these planning. So are you looking to just expand revenue of existing accounts? Because if that's the case, that's going to be something that you'll almost certainly have your customer success and account managers working on it. You could also involve some resources from your marketing team if you want to do customer marketing. This is where you're taking a concerted effort to educate your existing clients about other offerings that you have that they may not be aware of, or at least may not be aware of the benefits. For a small to mid-sized company in this space, I am a huge fan of using webinars and email marketing, especially webinars, to get your clients together and with a product manager, with a account manager, and bringing some representative case studies from clients that have been using this expanded feature set that they may not be using today. So this is where you basically shine a spotlight on clients that have been most successful with your software in the form of a webinar panel, live case study, whatever you want to call it. Of course, record it and repurpose it a dozen different ways so you can get more mileage out of this. But you're basically looking to cross-pollinate the success of some of your early adopters with the rest of your client base. So that's a really great playbook for being able to grow revenue, expand revenue, expansion revenue among your existing client base. In terms of growing revenue with your net new prospects, with new potential clients, that's a completely different kind of job role, a completely different kind of playbook. And again, this gets a little more complex if you have both a direct sales force and channel partners. With channel partners, obviously the ramp time is going to be considerably longer in most cases to educate and build trust with those partners, because they're not working just for your company 40 hours a week. They have multiple initiatives, multiple balls in the air at once, but they have an established client base. So there's definitely pros and cons. But this is, again, the argument for why, when it comes to growing this kind of revenue, you're typically splitting this up into 2 or 3 different teams that work on 2 or 3 different kinds of revenue growth. So let's talk about the net new. That would be direct sales coming organically into your company. So in this particular case, we want to make sure that we really understand the types of companies that do best with your software and the individual stakeholders, the individual buyer personas that are involved in the research and decision-making process with your companies. And from there, we build out a buyer persona. From the buyer persona, we build out an educational content calendar and events calendar that allows our client-facing team to show up early and often in the right places at the right time for the right people, and most of all in the right context, so that your team are seen as the go-to experts on anything and everything having to do with infrastructure management software for data centers. So this is going to involve, potentially, at the risk of getting really meta, webinars, live streams, podcasts, and a variety of different formats around that. In some cases, they could be educational, product agnostic, company agnostic kind of thought leadership webinars. In some cases, you may bring some of your most successful clients to these webinars and moderate panels. That can be a super powerful way to educate and build trust and infuse some social proof in this. You could have more consideration to decision stage kind of webinars where you're doing product demos to people that have attended the earlier stage webinars or raised their hand and wanted some sales contact, and the deals seem to kind of stalled and not moving forward. There's a variety of ways to do this, but I'm incredibly a huge fan for this kind of business of investing very, very aggressively in a multi-pronged, multifaceted webinar program that allows you to educate and build trust with multiple stakeholders from multiple companies simultaneously, and look and see who shows up, what their interactions look like, which ones you pass to sales, which ones you keep inviting to your webinar program and nurture and with over time. But it's super important to remember that, especially when we're talking about selling to IT professionals, they're more sales allergic than ever. Like Gartner did research recently and found that 83% of a typical buyer's journey is now over before vendor contact, before someone wants to talk with someone from a sales team. And this isn't just the early adopters. This is pretty much everyone. McKinsey did some similar kind of research and found 70 to 80% of decision makers now prefer a digital journey. So we can't keep showing up the same way we've been showing up when these buyer preferences have changed so much over the past 5 or 10 years. It's a combination of baby boomers retiring and next generation, Gen X, millennial, Gen Z, kind of replacing this. It's more digitally leaning. It's people during the first few years of the 2020s spending a ton of time working from home, the big work from home return to office debate kind of thing that's going on. And then on top of that, there are parts of the digital infrastructure data center industry that are continuing to kick and scream about a very old school playbook because they believe their buyers are different. The reality is, for an infrastructure management software company, your buyers are buying SaaS from different kinds of SaaS companies in very different ways than they would buy real estate. Very, very different ways. So the reality is for you to try to advance an argument that the CTOs or the NOC managers or whoever you're selling to are going to buy from you in an old school way from 10 years ago when they buy all other SaaS in a very modern self-propelled buyer's journey just doesn't make a lot of sense. So if you want to be able to grow revenue, we need to meet them where they actually are, not where we'd like them to be, living in an era that would require a DeLorean and a flux capacitor from Back to the Future to go back in a time machine and pretend that you're still selling 10 years ago. No. In order for this to work, we need to have extreme empathy about who they are, what they care about, their biggest goals and challenges. And we need to meet them where they are as educational resources, as teachers, consultants, trusted advisors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders. And the better job we can do that, the more likely it is that we're going to have a revenue growth engine that provides value and keeps our team competitive. So that's the net new. We also talked about the account managers and the customer marketing as the approach for the land and expand, the expansion revenue. And we also talked about the revenue growth opportunity that you can deploy if you have a strong channel partnership motion. So those are some of the key considerations that I would be thinking about for a data center infrastructure management software company that wants to grow its revenue.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And you're tuned into our weekly live stream, the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, where each week I tackle a handful of the biggest sales and marketing challenges that we're hearing about throughout the full data center digital infrastructure and critical facilities ecosystem. So next question up for this week is, how do we implement data center segmentation for sales and marketing growth? How do we implement data center segmentation for sales and marketing growth? So the first decision that you're going to make on how to approach segmentation for sales and marketing growth is we need to be aware of what kind of resources you can put into your segmentation. In other words, are there hundreds of people on your go-to-market team, or are there just a few or somewhere in between? In other words, if you work for a publicly traded REIT or a large publicly traded technology or facilities company that sells into the data center ecosystem, your segmentation is going to be way, way more specific, more subtly nuanced, more finely tuned than if you are from a mid-market company or a small to medium-sized business, a scale-up or startup in and around the data center ecosystem. I'm going to answer this as if you're somewhere in the middle, where you're a large, small business and you're aware that a lot of your messaging is falling flat. And because of that, your prospects and clients are ignoring you. And you've heard that segmentation and personalization is the way to grab people by the virtual shirt collar and pull them into your world, pull them into your ecosystem, into your sales funnel, into their buyer's journey, to intersect with your approach to helping to educate and build trust and guide them through their buyer's journey. So when it comes to implementing data center segmentation for sales and marketing growth, there's two basic kinds of segmentation that I'd encourage you to think about: who they are and where they are. Let's talk first about who they are. When it comes to segmenting, if you think about going to someone's website and you look at their website navigation, either the top navigation or the bottom navigation, there's a really good chance you're going to see some pages about who we help, perhaps solutions or some other kind of synonym. And within there, it's typically going to give you a window into that company's segmentation strategy. And in some cases, this is also manifested by boxes or buttons that you'll see on a homepage. But at the end of the day, companies sometimes segment by a certain kind of industry, like that they sell to manufacturing companies and telecommunications companies and healthcare companies. So you may see those three options under a Who We Help menu on a website homepage. You may also see boxes on a website homepage that are showing that that's for sure part of that particular company's segmentation strategy. So they're segmenting by industry or vertical. The second way that people also can segment on a Who We Are is segmenting by job role. In other words, perhaps you sell to ESG or CTO or CFO kind of leaders. So those three kinds of categories of leaders can often have very different goals that they're working on professionally, whether it's environmental sustainability, finance, or technology. So they'll have different goals or have different challenges as a result. Each of them usually deserves a separate page on the website and a separate lead generation offer, or a separate webinar, a separate kind of decision stage offer, and in some cases, even a different kind of account executive or sales development rep that's highly trained on what that particular stakeholder at that particular kind of company is working on at the intersection with how you would help them. So this is segmenting based on who they are, and it's usually the who is based on what kind of company they are from and what kind of job role they have within that company. So at a high level, you could call this like segmenting by the intersection of ideal client profile, ICP, and buyer persona. So that's the who. The where they are in the journey listens and is contextually relevant for not only who they are, but where they are in their active research process between having a goal or a challenge or trying to figure out an actual purchase decision. At the risk of really oversimplifying, but a really good 1.0 version for a lot of people watching or listening to this, there's the awareness stage, the consideration stage, and the decision stage of the buyer's journey, these three stages. During the awareness stage of the buyer's journey, your particular buyer persona has a goal that they're trying to do for their job that helps them get their job performance, their team's performance, and their company to the next level. You figure out these goals in your buyer persona research, and they're frequently even showing up in a job description. For sure, these are the kinds of goals, objectives and key results, key performance indicators, metrics, and dashboards that people are graded on that often determine whether they get promoted and whether they get bonuses, or in the case of sales compensation, commissions, and all the other things that go along with that. So there are individual people and there's individual stages of the journey that they go through. These stages that they go through: awareness, consideration, and decision. So there's goals they're working on, and then there's often challenges that are frustrating the heck out of them. These are the things that are stressing them out, that are causing them to have to work crazy hours, crazy overtime under incredibly stressful, adverse conditions. These are the things that cause them to have to make compromises on their family vacations where they literally don't feel like they're on vacation because they're constantly getting nagged by their job. These are the things that are causing them to chug Pepto-Bismol and get all stressed out, stress eating, whatever it is, and have to deal with all of these things. So those are the goals and the challenges. And early on in the buyer's journey, in the awareness stage, they know they have a goal that they're trying to figure out. They know they have a challenge that they're trying to address, but they really don't know much more than that. So your goal with your segmentation is to make sure that you have content and events that allow you to show up for a particular buyer persona in a certain kind of company and address some of their biggest goals and challenges in the awareness stage. In the consideration stage, they've started to give the solution category a name. But in the consideration stage, in the middle of the buyer's journey, in the middle of the sales cycle, they don't yet have companies in mind. They just know there's a category there. And during this stage, whereas like blogs and ebooks and webinars and podcasts and videos can be super effective in the awareness stage, in the consideration stage, buyer's guides, comparison tools, also more in-depth webinars can be incredibly helpful to help frame the criteria in favor with what your company actually does. So The basic idea here is if we understand that a typical journey goes through those three distinct stages: awareness, consideration, and decision, and there may be as many as 28 touch points between an initial goal or a challenge and ultimate purchase decision, our goal is for our company to show up in as many of those 28 touch points as possible. In the middle of the journey, they're trying to figure out what this is actually called and the pros and cons of different approaches. After they've progressed from consideration to decision, they now have specific companies in mind. And this is where they start to be open to looking at products and services and product marketing materials. And most companies in and around the data center ecosystem that are doing digital marketing the same way they did 10 years ago tend to get at least a passing grade at the decision stage, but many are completely missing in action when it comes to the awareness and the consideration stage. So at a very high level, when it comes to your segmentation, think about who they are and where they are. The who they are is defined by usually the intersection of your ideal client profile and a specific buyer persona. And the where they are is whether they're in awareness, consideration, or decision. So for example, if you have three different kinds of buyer personas, let's say you sell to an ESG leader, a CTO, and a CFO. You have three different kinds of buyer personas, and there's three stages of the buyer's journey. So you end up with like a 3x3 matrix. There's 9 boxes that need to be filled. It kind of looks like the Brady Bunch or a tic-tac-toe board. And the better job you can do with making sure that you have educational lead generation content that educates and builds trust at the intersection of a specific person, a who, and a where, with where they are in the buyer's journey, the better job you're going to do with using the segmentation and the personalization effectively to show up in the right places at the right time for the right people, and most of all, in the right context. And the context is so important. We need to understand that in the self-propelled buyer's journey, no one needs you to read the website to them anymore. There's just so many other ways that people are navigating the journey. And this is a big part of the reason why your decision makers, your decision committee are more sales allergic than ever. So in order for us to be able to add value, we need to show up as experts, not as transaction focused salespeople who are just trying to close them or just trying to get a deal on the board or obsessed with booking a meeting. We need to make conditions possible so our best prospects and clients actually want to spend time with members of your team. So it doesn't feel like you're always having to chase and beg and cajole and manipulate them into taking these meetings. This is where the event marketing budgets, by the way, get completely out of control because we're completely ignoring their preferences for so long that it goes from being a proactive opportunity to being a desperation opportunity. Don't put yourself in that situation where you're coming in reeking of desperation with all this. We need to get in early. We need to get in often, and we need to be there repeatedly. So our company is involved in so many of those 28 touch points that there no longer are gaps or opportunities for competitive forces to step in because they're learning everything that they need to go through their full buyer's journey from members of your team. It's not going to happen overnight, but this is the future of data center sales and marketing and growth within the data center industry. And in most cases, it's going to require a cultural change coming from the top down, where someone like in the C-suite says, okay, this is it. We need to be seen as the go-to experts in our space when it comes to anything and everything having to do with our niche within the data center ecosystem. Okay, so how does a data center infrastructure service provider increase sales? So how can a company that is a infrastructure service provider in and around the data center ecosystem increase sales? Well, there's a bunch of different ways to do this, but first and foremost, we need to get a lot more specific about why, WHY. Why are we trying to increase sales? Well, that's easy, right? More revenue is good, growth is good. Is it? Because the it depends is all revenue created equal? In other words, are all of the sales to all of your clients equally valuable? Or are there some clients that are way more valuable because it's more profitable, it's a shorter sales cycle, more favorable payment terms, it aligns more closely with our priorities that we're making in our research and development and product roadmap for the next 6, 12, 18 months because they're great logos, great reference counts, whatever it is. So let's first dispel the notion that all sales are good sales. Because especially if you operate in a commoditized portion of the digital infrastructure ecosystem, which now I would likely characterize as like single location and one or two location colocation operators that don't have a vertical focus. A lot of them sell really, really small deals where they literally can't afford traditional inside sales, outside, all that stuff anymore, just because there's so little margin. It's become so cutthroat and commoditized. And in a lot of ways, I see the single location colo operator facing a lot of the same challenges that hosting businesses faced 10 years ago and that managed service providers went through 10 years ago. So you may be an operator that's in and around colocation. You may face a lot of the revenue and profitability challenges that I just mentioned, or perhaps you have something that's truly differentiated. Perhaps you're able to sell to more mid-market and enterprise clients where there's a lot more margin and you can afford to make the right kind of investments in growth. Or perhaps your company isn't even a data center. Maybe it's a hyperscale company, in which case you have huge deals. So this is all completely a moot point because you have plenty of resources to be able to invest in growth and differentiation and educating and building trust with the right people. And maybe your constraint is more on the development side or on the grid capacity side. Or perhaps you're not even an operator. Maybe you're a technology or facilities company, or you're in construction or real estate. But first, we need to understand, who are these sales supposed to be with? Who are the ideal clients that we're looking for more of? In other words, if I look at the case study section of your website, if I look at your testimonials and look at your reviews, does that represent who you want to sell more to? If it does, fantastic. Build your ideal client profile, get clarity on where they're located, their company size, their business models, their industries, build out your target account list, build out the buyer personas within those target accounts, and go nuts creating fantastic educational content and events so you can educate and build trust with the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all in the right context. And that alone, executed well, will do wonders for increasing sales. But if I look at your case studies page and I talk with your salespeople, if I talk with your account managers and discover that there's 20% of clients that you're losing money on, that are terrible, miserable companies to work with, that cause extreme burnout and stress among your team members, and you really would have to like to have the luxury of phasing that segment out, well, you know that all revenue is not the same. So let's assume that we're really clear on what kind of revenue we want next, and we have a lot of clarity on the ideal client profile, the buyer personas, the journey that we want to help guide those buyer personas through the 28 touch points between awareness to consideration decision. And we've also decided about what the appropriate mix is between direct and indirect, or channel partners. So in other words, you've also walked through deciding whether your company is using a mix of direct sales and indirect sales like channel partners, or whether you're 100% channel partner focused or 100% direct sales focused, or somewhere in the middle. After you've thought through those issues, how specific your ideal client profile is and the nature of your sales force, then also you want to think about, are you looking to increase net new sales, or are you looking to expand existing accounts and grow revenue from within existing accounts? Because that also dictates different people within your go-to-market team being involved. If we're talking about expanding different accounts, this is often going to be the domain of your CSMs, your client success, customer success managers, your account managers, often called AMs. It can often be those teams working with your marketing team to produce customer marketing that educates and builds trust at scale, that makes sure that the onboarding materials are as tight as possible, perhaps having some customer specific events, both offline events, could be breakfast seminars, lunch and learn, symposiums, customer only conferences, and virtual versions of those. Webinars, online events, live streams just for clients. So you're getting super specific about a life cycle stage. They're already existing customers or clients. If you have a channel partner program, again, it's the same thing here. Is they're going to need their own separate partner enablement approach. And you're basically trying to decide, are you trying to get net new channel partners signed up and onboarded, or are you trying to help existing channel partners be more successful? Because each of them will have a different approach to growing channel partner sourced revenue. So at the end of the day, for a data center infrastructure service provider that wants to increase sales, that wants to increase revenue, the first thing is to recognize that all revenue is not created equal. Some of it's fantastic, some of it's terrible. Let's call it for what it is. So we need to make sure we're focusing on the right kind of revenue, the right go-to-market strategy. And we get into being really tight about our ideal client profile, our target account list, our buyer personas. That drives having educational events, educational content, resources where we're spending so much time with our prioritized buyer personas throughout their buyer's journey that there's really no room left for our competitors to get a word in edgewise, because our buyer personas are getting everything that they need related to our category of infrastructure with no need to really look elsewhere. That guarantees that we're on the short list. In many cases, it collapses the short list down to one, where we're the only one left on the short list by the time they get to be in market at the decision stage. So clarity about who they are, their like company size, their location, their industries, clarity about their job roles, who's on the decision committee, who we need to be building these relationships with. Is this net new revenue? Is it the domain of your CSMs and AMs and a customer marketing initiative for expanding revenue? Or perhaps it's a channel partner initiative and you're trying to decide whether it's net new channel partners that you're after, or expanding, helping your channel partners to sell more and deeper into their existing accounts. So all of these are major, major considerations that I want you to think about to get a lot more specific about how you're going to increase sales for your data center infrastructure service provider business. And that brings us to our final question as we head down the home stretch in this week's data center go-to-market sales and marketing Q&A live stream. By the way, if you want to make sure that you stay up to date on our upcoming events and resources, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter directly on our website at www.dcsmi.com, and just click the button to subscribe to newsletters so you get these notifications every week in your email inbox on Sundays. Okay, so the final question for this week is, how does a data center relocation company close more deals? How can a data center relocation company close more deals? So there's two ways to approach this. If I take the question literally, it sounds like you have a lot of opportunities sitting on your deals board and they are not closing. So you're doing well with lead generation. You have a good tight criteria that forces your account executives, sales development reps, probably your account executives in most cases, to have a forecasted close date and a forecasted deal size before they can put it up into the pipeline on the deals board. And because of that, they put it up, and then you define the stages that the prospect needs to go through based on action on the prospect side that determine where they are in terms of deal stages within opportunity. So like at a high level, you're saying you want to close more deals. So I'm going to go with the idea here that because you want to close more deals, that all of these deals are sitting in the opportunity lifecycle stage in your CRM. And it's just a matter that some of them are at earlier deal stages than others. And if that's the case, we need to understand specifically where these deals are getting stuck. Because at some point for them to get into the opportunity stage, a member of your sales team reviewed that lead and sales accepted it. SAL, sales accepted lead, sales qualified lead, whatever you want to call it. And a member of your sales team met with that person and determined that there is an opportunity and it could have a forecasted deal size of this, and it could have a forecasted close date of that. So all of that is in place. And then all of a sudden, these are not advancing. Why are they not advancing? So how's the sales process? Are the stages that this deal would go through, have you seen, in other words, is your company do you have product market fit for starters? In other words, you know who exactly your ideal clients are, what products and services they purchase from your company related to relocation, at what price points, at what deal sizes, how often, or on a recurring basis. This is probably how often. Most relocation companies aren't selling anything that's recurring revenue. So it's a certain deal size. And then with that, you'll also know almost certainly who's typically on the decision committee and how long the sales cycle length is. And you'll also have profit margin in mind. So in other words, not only the ideal client profile, the buyer personas that are involved, and the unit economics. That's product market fit. Go to market fit means an investor or board member comes along and says, I'm going to pour another couple $1,000,000, another couple £1,000,000 into growth for this particular month, for this particular quarter, euros, whatever your local currency is. And if I give you all of this additional budget, I'm highly confident that as the sales directors, the sales leaders, the VP of sales, whoever it is, are growing the teams and growing the headcount, that the wheels aren't going to fall off, that we're going to continue to close. We're going to continue to have success at various metrics, advancing from one stage of the deals to another. So in order for you to have high confidence about what's working and what's not working, there's a lot of stages that your company needs to go through, from getting to product market fit to getting to go to market fit, and then having a consistent hiring process, a consistent onboarding process, having a consistent coaching process. Unlike certain sectors of digital infrastructure and data centers, I haven't seen companies in relocation have a lot of success with a completely self-propelled buyer's journey. In other words, there's IaaS companies, infrastructure as a service companies, that are kind of blurring the line between cloud hosting, private hosting, hybrid hosting, and colocation, that are successful, at least on the SMB side, of having completely self-driven signups, where a purchase looks a lot more like e-commerce. I don't see that happening currently or anytime in the near future with relocation. There's still way too much that goes into large data center moves, where your account manager is taking on the role of a consultant and advisor and helping to kind of spec out the move and price out the move and timetable, and working with all the stakeholders that are involved. So getting clarity among the stages that your average deal goes through, and making sure that you're putting a consistent kind of lead through that, is incredibly important. That's all the stuff around product market fit and go to market fit. In terms of closing more deals, I think one of the things that universally helps companies across the ecosystem is getting your prospects to hear from your best clients. So this is your case studies, your testimonials. This is having an event, whether it's in person or virtual, where your prospects get to meet your super happy clients. And in the data center industry, I see people doing this really well with panel-based webinars, where they interview one or more happy clients, and they invite their prospects to understand how their happy clients went through the process of planning a move and doing a move, and post-mortem what they learned about what worked well and what they didn't. And in the course of that conversation, it almost always comes up that they end up saying very kind things about your company. Obviously, if they're not a big fan of your company, they shouldn't be invited to be on the panel of your webinar. The offline version of this that I see working exceptionally well in the digital infrastructure data center space, including companies that do moves, that do relocation and commissioning and decommissioning, kind of the first cousins in all of this, is inviting a combination of prospects and clients to an event. And it could be an educational event where you're actually hearing from them, very similar to what I was just outlining with the webinar, or it could be a fun event. Not that you're not having fun at your educational events, but it could be like taking, let's say you rent out a suite at a baseball stadium or a football stadium or a basketball arena or something like that. And you have 20 seats, and of those 20 seats, 2 or 3 are your team members. You invite 2 or 3 clients that love you, and the rest are all prospects. And you just let the night happen organically. And in the course of your prospects getting to meet your clients and mingling, it will come up how much they love working with your company, and how much you save their butt by having this great, super smooth relocation move, and how they'd be crazy to look anywhere else. Some people have also done really well having like roundtable dinners where they invite, again, the same thing. It's the private room in a fancy restaurant or hotel or something like that. You take 20 people out, 2 or 3 people are from your team, 2 or 3 are clients, and the rest are prospects. And you just you go around the table, everyone talk about what they're working on, what their biggest takeaway was, what their biggest challenges, whatever. And you just kind of let the mingling happen organically. And again, your best clients end up becoming the thing that gets your deals unstuck. Because things that come out of the mouth of your sales team are viewed skeptically. Things that come out of the mouths of your clients are viewed much less skeptically and viewed as a lot more trusted. So those are some of the key things that I would think about to help you close more deals, is more actively courting and pollinating this social proof between your clients and your prospects, getting more clarity on your deal stages, assuming that your company already has product market fit and go to market fit. By the way, if you have channel partners who, in the context of a data center relocation company, could be from a lot of different places within the digital ecosystem. As I mentioned a few moments ago, data center commissioning and decommissioning companies, especially decommissioning companies, are heavily involved in what happens to equipment afterwards. IT asset and disposition companies, also kind of like the first cousin of data center relocation companies. So if you're looking to build like formal and informal kind of partnerships, channel partnerships, referral program, co-marketing, for sure those companies can be hugely helpful. Anyone having to do with construction or real estate can also be a great source of referrals. Data center construction, data center real estate, DCRE, or investment on the capital side, like private equity, venture capital, can all be great sources of referrals for a data center operator or end user that needs help with a data center relocation. And these could be formal referral programs. It could be a podcast, an interview-based podcast or something like that, where you look for an excuse to just build relationships and share best practices with each other and your collective audiences. There's a lot of different ways to approach this, but at the end of the day, get clarity around the deal stages, think about how to cross-pollinate the social proof, and think about the adjacent kinds of businesses that also deal with, that also talk with people on a regular basis, who are leading indicators of a data center relocation need coming up in the very near future. So that is the final question that we're going to address in this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live stream. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. I wish you great success in growing your influence, growing your team's influence, growing your company's influence in the growth of the data center industry, and let us know how we can help. Look forward to seeing you back again next week. Take care now.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.